Hi, my friends. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Marcy. Today, I'm going to talk about the 6 books I read in October and give you my recommendations. I read 6 books in October. I read 3 light, fun books, and I read 3 deeper slash longer books. And I want to talk about them and maybe give you some recommendations for your reading lists in the future. First book I read, #IMomSoHard by Kristen Hensley and Jen Smedley. I actually listened to this book on audiobooks because Jen and Kristen are hilarious. They have a podcast, they do videos on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and they mom so hard. They work so hard at being moms, and they're 2 moms with young kids. They found each other, they're best friends, and they try so hard and things just don't always work for them, and they talk about it. And they've built a community of women who can understand that life is not always going to be perfect, and that's okay. One of my favorite videos they did on #IMomSoHard was when Jen, for some reason, decided to try on her wedding dress after having 2 kids and about 10 years later after she wore it the first time. And it did not fit, but she was going to make it fit, and it was just hilarious. And we've all been there. I really enjoy them. So if you're a young mom, you need some community, you need a laugh, check out #IMomSoHard. Next book is Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume. This book was published initially in 1972, and I think I read it in 1978, and it was so funny. So I read it aloud to my son this month, and we loved it. It is so cute, so funny. It holds up all these years later. I was really surprised. So if you don't remember, it's the story of Peter. He's in 4th grade and he's nothing. And his little brother is 3. His name's Fudge, and he gets all the attention and does all these zany things and gets Peter into trouble all the time. And they have a friend, Sheila, the bossy 10-year-old babysitter that lives in the building. Oh, so good. Holds up. Highly recommend. I loved Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. Next book, Please Like Me by Mindy Kaling. She played Kelly on The Office, and she's had some shows on Netflix. So if you check her out and you really, really like her, you might want to read this book. She's got lots of books, and I've read a few. Honestly, nothing stands out about this book. I don't remember anything, so not my favorite book of the month. And I'm just going to move on. So here's the 3 long, more literature type books that I read this month. First one, Fatty Legs. Actually, wasn't very long. This one we did for social studies for our homeschool. It was written by Christy Jordan Fenton and Margaret Oleman Pokiak Fenton. Margaret is the grandma, and Christy is her granddaughter. And Christy was interested in Oleman's stories and journey as a young girl in a residential school in Canada. Oleman lived on one of the northern islands in Canada, and she lived with her family, and they lived off the land. So they did a lot of hunting and fishing, and they would sell their furs and make a living that way. And Oleman's older sister had been to residential school, had learned to read, and Oleman was very keen on learning to read. She was a smart girl, and she was a girl with strength of character. So her parents did not want to let her go to residential school, but she asked and finally broke them down, and she went. And so she went to school. She was supposed to go from 1 school year and then come home. And she thought, I'll learn to read, and then I'll stay home and I'll read my stories. I'll read about Alice in Wonderland and stay home. But what happened was the next summer, the ice didn't melt enough for her family to travel from that island to the mainland to come pick her up. So she had to stay at residential school for 2 years. During that time, she wasn't allowed to speak her native language. She was an Inuit woman, so she lost her language. She lost her taste for Inuit food. She got in a lot of trouble because she was so headstrong, and it was a hard time for her. But she did learn to read, so there's that. But it really gives you a glimpse into what these residential schools were like from the perspective of a woman who wasn't terribly bitter about it. It was just part of her life, a different generation. But you can really see how those residential schools have impacted our country. This was written for probably middle school and younger, and it was very good. I enjoyed it a lot. And the next book I read was called Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Alfred Lansing. All about the cold, and I love it. So this is Shackleton, and he's British, and he wants to be the first man with his crew to cross the continent of Antarctica. So he starts in England, and he picks up people who want to be cold and want to adventure, and picks them up, and then he goes across to South America and picks up all the people that like the cold and would be really good on his team. Ends up with, I think, 24 men. And they get to Antarctica, and they're gonna get off the boat and cross Antarctica. But before they can get to land, the ice comes around the boat, and they are locked in the ice. And the ice just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And they have to get off the boat and get back to, I'm like, this is a true story, and somebody wrote it, and therefore they survived. I do not know how they survived. The adventure was so fun and great and true and gritty, and I loved it so much. It was written in the 40s. It still holds up for what I like to read. So let's see. At one point, I'm reading, and they are camped out on a chunk of ice that's floating through the ocean. How are they going to get off this and survive? I have no idea. So good. I loved Shackleton because I thought he was a great leader. Although leading people to cross a continent that's really cold and people could die, that's not what the kind of leader I'm looking for. But he never sent people to do things that he wasn't willing to do himself. He always led from the front. He was always really good at reading people and having people work together who worked well together. If you like adventure and if you like being cold, then I would definitely give this book a read. It was really good, and I loved it. Okay, the last book I read was called Four Winds by Kristin Hannah. This is the fourth book I've read of Kristin Hannah, and I was excited to read it. It's about the 1930s in Texas in the United States, and there's a dust bowl going on. Our main character lives in a family of farmers, and it was hard. They had to work so hard to survive the dust bowl, and some of the family actually moved to California, which wasn't any better of a life. It was just a hard time. And I learned so much about the Depression, which I really appreciated. But I never actually felt a connection with the main characters and their plight. It was more like I'm reading the facts. It's like a history book. And honestly, one of the things I enjoy about Kristin Hannah's writing is by the end of the book, I'm bawling my head off, and it's just so cathartic, and I love that. And I did not shed a tear this time, and that was very disappointing to me because I'd spent all this time reading about the Depression, and it was so depressing and so sad. One day my son even asked, "What's wrong?" And I just said, "Well, nothing. I'm just reading a sad book." So I wish I could have felt that at the end and had a good cry, but alas, I didn't. So I would probably recommend The Nightingale or The Great Alone if you're going to look for a sob story by Kristin Hannah. Okay, so those were the 6 books I read this month. If you're looking for a recommendation, I hope that helps, and I will see you in November. Bye.